I heard something really interesting the other day. Angela Lazaro, she's a realtor over in Richmond.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
Well, she was telling this story. She was at the cleaners, right? And she overhears this father and son talking.
Okay.
The dad's thinking about selling the house they've lived in for ages, and the son pipes up, says something like, hey, we can find a new place together, and since we've been here, like, over 10 years, selling it means we're first-time home buyers again.
Ah, okay. I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a classic misunderstanding, isn't it?
Exactly. It really stuck with me because it highlights this common confusion.
It really does. This idea that just because time passes or you sell a long-held home, you somehow, reset the clock.
Right. And that's actually what we're going to dive into for you today.
Right.
If you've ever been a bit fuzzy on what actually makes someone a first-time home buyer, or maybe you know someone like that son at the cleaners, well, stick around.
Mm-hmm. Because we're going to try and bring some clarity. We're drawing on Angela's experience, plus some specific rules and exceptions, looking particularly at Virginia guidelines.
Our goal here is really to help you understand who qualifies, and maybe some surprising situations where you might still qualify, even if you've owned before.
So let's start with that core idea from the story, the general definition. What are we usually talking about?
Well, generally it comes down to something called the 3-year rule.
Yeah, it's the baseline, yeah. Basically, you're often seen as a first-time buyer if you haven't owned your main home, your primary residence, for at least 3 years leading up to the new purchase.
Okay, so going back to the story, the son was thinking, we owned for way more than 3 years, so selling must reset us.
And that's the snag. The 3-year rule is more about the gap in ownership. If you currently own your primary home and sell it, you generally don't immediately become a first-time buyer again just because you sold it.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. It's about not having owned within that recent 3-year period.
Exactly. Continuous ownership, even for a long time, usually means you're not fitting that specific definition for, say, certain loan programs.
But, and this is where it gets interesting, our sources point out there are quite a few exceptions. It's not totally black and white.
No, definitely not. And this is where people often get surprised. The general rule is one thing, but these exceptions, especially looking at some outline for Virginia, can really change the picture.
Oh, because maybe walk through some of those. The first one mentioned was about mobile homes.
Yes. So if you owned a mobile home within the last 3 years, but it wasn't on a permanent foundation, that ownership might not count against you.
Interesting. Because it's not considered the same kind of permanent structure.
Sort of, yeah. It's often classified differently in these contexts.
Okay. What's another situation?
A really important one is the sometimes called the single parent exception.
Yeah.
If you used to own a home with a former spouse, maybe through divorce, and you're now a single parent, you might qualify as a first-time buyer again, even if that previous ownership was recent. It acknowledges that changed circumstance.
That seems fair, recognizing major life changes.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Well, similar to the mobile home idea, owning a home previously that wasn't on a permanent foundation, or maybe one that wasn't up to code, didn't comply with building regulations.
So the condition or type of the previous home matters.
It can, yes. The thinking is that it might not have been equivalent to owning a standard primary residence.
What about just owning, say, a piece of land, no house on it?
Right. Owning vacant land or even commercial property, but never having owned an actual single-family residence where you lived, that usually doesn't disqualify you either, especially for things like first-time homebuyer savings accounts.
Okay. The focus is really on that primary residence history.
Precisely.
I think I also saw something about individuals who are in foster care.
Yes, that's another potential exception. For some programs, certain requirements might be waived for individuals who have spent time in foster care. It's about improving access.
Good to know. And there was one more. Something about specific locations.
That's right. In certain designated areas, sometimes called areas of economic opportunity, the rules might be different. You could potentially qualify even with recent homeownership as part of an effort to boost buying in those zones.
Wow. Okay, so it's definitely way more complex than just have you owned a house in the last 3 years.
Absolutely. Which really brings us back to Angela Lazaro's core advice, doesn't it?
Talk to a lender.
Exactly. Always talk to a lender. State rules can vary. Specific first-time buyer programs have their own specific rules. Our other source also emphasized checking with a Virginia housing-approved lender specifically to get the really accurate, tailored advice for programs here.
Right. So Angela's bottom line, and really the takeaway here is, if you've ever bought before, don't make assumptions. Have that conversation.
It could open doors you didn't expect or, prevent disappointment if you assumed you qualified and don't for a specific program.
So wrapping this up, the big takeaway for you listening is that first-time homebuyer isn't a simple yes-no based on recent history.
That 3-year rule is a factor, sure, but it's got conditions. And then you've got all these exceptions based on the type of property, your personal situation, even geography.
Hopefully this deep dive gives you a clearer picture whether you're thinking about buying soon or you've owned before and were just curious. It helps navigate those conversations or even just understand your own potential standing,
Definitely.
which leads to kind of a final thought for you to ponder. Thinking about all these rules, and especially those exceptions, what are some maybe less obvious, unexpected situations where someone could actually qualify as a first-time buyer, even with prior ownership on their record?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about how individual circumstances interact with these regulations.
It really does. And if you happen to be in the Richmond area and these questions feel very real for you, Angela Lazzaro is a great resource.
She did share her contact info, right?
Yep. She said folks can reach her at 804-203-2217. That's 804-203-2217. Or you can find her online at angelazaro.fathomrealty.com.
Good to have a specific contact for people wanting to dig deeper into their own situation.
Absolutely. Good starting point for those local questions.